Good afternoon, YouTube. This is the Home Handyman. I'm coming to you in my garage where I had a request for somebody to say, hey, I saw one of your pictures posted of a hat rack you did out of railroad spike and horseshoes. Can you give us a little how-to video on how to do that? And I said, sure. We'll do it in a couple of steps, or a few steps actually. And I'll just go slow and I'll show you what I do. Alright, the first thing is get yourself some horseshoes from somewhere. Here's one of the horseshoes that I got. What I do is I bring this right to the edge of my welding table. The next thing I do is I take a railroad spike. I put it in my vise. Now I measured in 3 1/4 inches and I made a mark, and this is where I'll cut it. It doesn't have to be 3 1/4. You can make it shorter, longer, whatever you like. But it comes to right there, and I go ahead and I cut this off. Okay, then I take my horseshoe, like I said, and I put it to the very edge here on my welding table. And I take the vice grip, and I make sure it's nice and straight looking. About like that. Put your vice grip off to the side just a little bit. Okay, I got the vice grip clamped holding this to the table. I take the spike. Now you can weld it right on top. I've done that before. Or because it's flush, you can weld it right here in the center. Now, to keep this centered, I use these inexpensive, they're cheap magnets out at Harbor Freight. I just line it up like this. Make sure it's nice, upright, it's straight the way that you want it. And go ahead and weld right here. Okay. You can use your arc welder, oxyacetylene. I have a MIG welder, so I MIG welded mine. Okay, so when you're done with that, then you're going to take it over to your drill press and you're going to drill holes. Now the nice thing about drilling holes is right here, or right here, I'd probably do it right here in the middle. On each side, there's where the nails go in when they shoe the horse. I use those holes, I put a drop of oil there, and I come down and I drill my holes, and I make them as big around as that I can drop a drywall screw through. I use drywall screws. Drywall screws are good for this kind of a project. They're incredibly hard, but they're brittle. So you have to be careful when you're screwing this into the actual wood. And I'll show you that in a few minutes. So we'll take it over the drill press right now. We'll drill a hole. Hold on. There we go. Now you can drill these holes before or after you weld it. It doesn't matter. I'm going to drill this one before I weld it. Okay, that's it. The holes are drilled. It just took a couple of seconds. You can use a hand drill. You can use a cordless drill or anything you want. I just don't drill them real big. Like I said, just enough for just enough for the drywall screw to go through. Show you why here in just a little bit. Okay, so what's the next step? Hang on a second. Okay, let's say that you have your spikes and your horseshoes all welded up and they don't quite look right. I went to True Value to look for some paint. I was just going to paint them between silver, rust colored spike. It didn't look good. I came across this Rust-Oleum multicolored textured spray paint. This stuff works really well. It hides a lot of little defects and imperfections in the work you've done, and I'll show you here. I'm gonna pause here and zoom in on this. Okay, so this gives it like a bronze color, and I spray painted all 5 of our coat rack hooks. Okay, so I did that. The holes were drilled, they're welded. I set them aside because now you want to get a piece of wood to mount these to. So I went out to Lowe's. I had to buy some other stuff. And I went over to the section on pine boarding, and I got this piece of pine. It was about $8. It's about 6 feet or so tall. It's about 3/4 inch thick. It's about 7 1/4 inches wide. And I thought, okay, well, I can use that because I know that the horseshoes will mount on there and I'll still have room to, you know, stain the wood and do some decorating. And I can make it as long as I want. Now, the first piece I cut to 4 feet long, and I was going to stain it, and I thought, well, I'm going to put an edge on it. So what I did, and I'm going to pause and show you in just a second, I cut it to the length that I wanted. Now you can cut the corners with a jigsaw or however you want and just round them off with a belt sander, random orbital, or if you have a disc sander, anything like that, and it would look fine. But I have a router, so I put a chamfer bit in it and I went around that piece of wood with my chamfer bit. Then I went and I got a piece of 150 grit sandpaper and just a small scrap piece of wood as a sanding block, and I went around all the edging on the piece of wood. Then I laid it flat on the bench and I went over it with, it's pretty nice wood the way that it is, so I didn't use a real coarse grit. I used 150 and I took my time and I sanded it. Then I turned around, I laid it out, I blew it off with my blowgun and I wiped it down real good. Then I laid it on the surface. Now, I had some old stain laying around. I'll show you a picture of it here in just a second. Now, you can use nothing. You can use a torch and put a light burn to it all over. You can do anything you want to it right now for finish work. I decided I had these canned finishes. I think I bought like 4 of them at a garage sale. They were almost full quarts of Minwax stain. I think I paid like $3 or $4. I mean, you can't go wrong at $1 a quart. So they were just getting rid of it, and I went ahead and bought them. And I'll show you a picture. One sec, and then we'll move on. Okay, here's a picture of the Minwax wood stain I used. It's called Provincial. Now, I took a scrap piece of wood, and you should always do this with anything that you're trying out a new finish on. I put some of this stain on there. I matched it up to the coat rack hooks, and I thought, hey, that looks pretty good. So I'm going to do the whole piece of wood in that. So I laid the piece of wood down. You can use a shop rag, you can use old paper towels, a paintbrush, whatever you want to use. And I put the stain on there, and I think it's oil-based because I had plenty of time to work with the stain. So I put it all over the piece of wood. I did the edges first, then I did the face of it. Then I took another shop towel and I started wiping it with the grain in really long strokes, and I made the stain and the finish as even as I could all the way around the piece. Then I looked at it and I thought, okay, it looks fine, and I let it dry. I let it dry 24 hours, and I'll show you a picture here in a minute. I let it dry for 24 hours. Now at that time you can decide, hey, it's not dark enough, you can apply more. If you said, hey, it's a little bit darker than I liked, put some 320 grit sandpaper on an orbital sanding disc, and you can go over the whole piece. You can dust it off, look at it, add more, leave it alone. Lots and lots of options at that point. So I'm going to pause this, lay the piece out, and show you what I did and how it came out. Hold on one moment. Okay, here I got it on my shop bench, and I got it sitting up at a little bit of an angle. I just want to see how this came out film wise. But this is 4 feet long. It has that chamfered edge on it, and it came out really nice. I hope it shows up really well, you know, when I edit this and I get it onto YouTube. Okay, and it's got a nice wet look to it. So now the question became, what am I using for my top finish? Hang on, let me pull out a can of it and we'll talk about it. I use Rust-Oleum Painter's Touch 2x Ultra Cover Gloss Clear. I like this stuff. I'm getting to where I really like it. It coats really well. Somebody asked me, hey, is it like lacquer where the coats will burn in on top of each other? I don't want to say that that's true, but one coat over another, it seems to blend in real well. I'm going to use the word blend. I don't want to say it burns in. I know lacquer does, especially nitrocellulose based lacquer. One coat will burn into another, and you can really build up a finish with lacquer the more you spray it. This stuff, I haven't really gone on any of these coat racks. I usually put 1, 2, 3, let me think. I usually use about 5 coats, maybe 6 at the most, but I don't go crazy about it. You'll know when the finish is done. You take a look at it at different angles in the light, and you'll see it's got that shiny gloss finish all over it. There's no fading marks. There's nothing weird going on, and you'll know that you're done. But this is what I use. Now, let's move on to the next step. Give me 1 sec to set up. I'll be right with you. Okay, what I did is my welding table. This piece of sheet metal is 4 feet long. So I laid out all 5 of these along there to figure out my spacing. I started over here in this corner, and I wanted to know how far in do I want to go before the middle of my first coat rack hook. Okay, then I made that same distance on the very last one here on the end. Then I took the in-between, the distance, and I divided it and said okay, so it tells me I should be at, I think 9.5 inches is what it came out to be. And so I put marks, and then I laid them all on there, and it came out looking good. Okay, so figure out your spacing next before you go and put this on the real wood. I'll show you why I do it this way. So I know my spacing. I'm going to come in on the edges here by about it's 5 inches in on each edge, and then the middle of that railroad spike on that line, and then after that, yeah, it's every 9.5 inches spaced down to each one of those end coat rack hooks, and that gives me perfect spacing all the way along in between. So we know it's 9.5 inches, so write it down, make a note of it, and I'll show you how we're going to do this next step. I'm going to pull that piece of finished wood down that I did, that I showed you, and we'll set these on there and we'll start screwing them in. Give me 1 minute to set up, I'll be right with you. Now what I did on the edge of the wood is I measured in 5 inches, just like this, and I set that down on there so that this is in the middle of that 5-inch mark, and I lined it up so it looks nice and straight up and down. Take your time. Now the reason why I told you to do it this way, I had a friend, he kept kind of messing up the wood. This finish is still soft. I've put the last coat on it probably 4 or 5 hours ago, maybe this morning, I don't remember, but it's still soft, and it's going to take a week or more for it to gas off, rock harden, do its chemical reaction, and really harden up. So this finish is still soft. So take your time and do this, and then you can set the whole project to the side. Your other option, of course, is wait the week or two. Then you can probably set it on there, and you can get away with moving it around without worrying so much. I do them this way because I make a lot of these. So anyway, so I'm going to set my drill up, which I pretty much, I think, have it set up. Let me zoom in on it. It's my favorite little handy tool right there, 20 volt Max DeWalt cordless drill. Very powerful, and I use the settings up on it so that I don't screw that screw down so hard it snaps it. So give me 1 sec, I'll set it up and I'll show you on this first one. So I'll show you on this first one how to affix it to the wood, and we'll go from there. And I'll show you real quick the drywall screws. I'm just using small drywall screws. Let me see if I can set it on the bench and zoom in on it. Gives you a better look at it. So these drywall screws, they're 1.5 inches long, or I'm sorry, they're 1.25 inches long. So I'll set up, let you see, I'll just zap one in, and then we're going to do all of them that way. Hang on just a sec. Oops. Okay, with my drill, and I have it set to number 3, okay, to be on the safe side. Take a drywall screw, find the hole that you drilled out, which is right here. You can always bump this forward, number 4 maybe. Okay, 4 seems to be the spot. So that's what we're going to use, and I'm going to go along here with that measurement all the way along, and I'll be right back with you. So now I've put all 5 on there, and I went ahead and I shot it with one more coat of the gloss. I went over everything, including all of the hooks. Makes it look more uniform, makes it look shiny, and it'll turn out real well, I think. And let's see, let's move on to questions and answers, because I'm about done. It's not a very lengthy project, actually. You can weld up a whole bunch of these, throw them in a pile, and then just grab them and start making coat racks. They sell real easily. I sell a lot of them to friends that I work with. They use them in their garages. A couple of people use them in their homes. They think they're rustic and pretty cool looking. Anyway. Questions and answers off of the forum. Let's see. Okay, wood selection, whether you're at Lowe's, Home Depot, or wherever you're at. I take this wood and I set it up on its edge and I look down it. You're looking for any warps or any big hoop-de-doos. If you do, well, that one you don't want. You're trying to find the straightest board that you possibly can, and hopefully one that's got some character in it and it's not just solid bland. Okay, and then look for one that doesn't have splits, cracks, or anything like that. Now, around those knot holes, sometimes you're not going to get around it. It's going to have some cracks. So what I would tell you to do for that is use a little CA glue. In the previous video I showed you a container of CA glue I have. I can't find it right now. You can buy it online on Amazon, a lot of websites. When you first get the wood, fill those little cracks and stuff with CA glue. It hardens like within minutes, okay? So 5, 10, 15 minutes you could sand it probably. Anyway, it will harden up. It will stop the cracking from continuing. Bits. Well, you have a whole selection of bits out there. You can get bullnose corners, half rounds, quarter rounds, chamfer bits. It's endless. The packages will show you what they look like. It's whatever you decide to pick for your projects. Can I use Danish oil? You can use Danish oil, teak oil, linseed oil, anything that you want in terms of, you know, wood finishing oils on here. You just have to let it sit, let it cure, okay, before you go on to the next step of finishing. I've done it before. It just all depends on what you're after in terms of what you want the wood to look like. Can I play around using lacquer and varnishes? Yes, you can actually, the trans tint, I'll put a little thing in the caption here. You can buy small bottles of it. They're kind of expensive. They're about $12 a bottle. But you only use like 2 or 3 drops. And if you have one of those Badger spray brushes, I have one off of my compressor. You can get those on Amazon. They're great little hobby airbrushes, okay? And if you put 1 or 2 drops in one of those little fat round glass containers, I mean, that's enough for the whole project. And then you can tone it. So the answer is yes. It just depends on what you want to use. You can apply your stains by brush, by rag, by sponge, by paper towel, by spray, whatever you want to do, whatever you have. On this project, I wiped it on with a paper towel. I wanted to keep it as absolutely simple to do as possible to show you how quick and easy you can do something nice and decorative. Okay, what happens if the screws here, where we're screwing, what happens if they go through the back side of the wood? Take your angle grinder, with like 80 grit or whatever's on it, fire it up and just touch those tips. If it digs down into the wood a little bit, who cares? It's not going to show. Plus you can always take a little dab of the stain that you were using and go over it, so that takes care of that, but the screws will keep them on there in a good permanent way. Okay, if this is going to go outside, I always make this comment, no, I would not have used that Rust-Oleum Painter's Touch. I would have used Helmsman, or I would have found some other kind of a spar varnish, you know, even marine grade or whatever. I would use a much better quality varnish than just your general varnishes, because it has to be able to stand up and be durable to those outside elements. Okay, so those are things to think about. I hope you learned something. I hope everybody's having a great day. I hope you click subscribe and follow me. We will do more of these simple projects. You can do these at home. The tools really are minimal, but yes, you will need a welder. You will need a router. If those things bother you expense-wise, check Craigslist. Check some of these places. I've bought fantastic tools off of Craigslist at a fraction of the price that they sell for in the store. They might be slightly used, but they're still great tools if you know what you're looking at when you go to buy it. All right, Home Handyman signing off. You guys have a wonderful day. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.